All right, welcome everybody. Yes, it's your good friend Plausible here. We're back for another radio show with my good friend Joe.
How's it going?
And today we're going to be talking about our favorite memories from the Atari age. We're talking about the early 80s now. When did Atari first come out? Do you remember offhand?
I want to say 1983, but I'm not 100% sure. I know it was early 80s.
Right, very early 80s, if not late 70s. I want to say like 78, 79
Actually,
sometime.
yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
It might have been actually in the 70s.
Now, you have to remember, kids, this is where it all started. When it comes to video games, Atari was the big one that actually brought it home to us. Of course, Joe and I were around during the arcade explosion, where arcade games were very huge and people were playing arcades all the time. I miss that. I miss being able to walk by stores or anything and see those arcade games and just play them for a quarter. So let's talk about some of our favorite memories. The first one, Pitfall. This is the king. It's so funny because one thing about these games is that they were very repetitive. You had similar scenes over and over again. You had the pits, you had the log, the scorpion below. Very nice scenes, but they kept repeating. And of course, you had the gold, the silver, and the bronze. And you had to get as much money as you can without dying. Joe, what are some memories of Pitfall?
One of the biggest memories I remember was a lot of people. I don't know if they knew this or not, but as soon as the game started, the best way to play the game is run the opposite way you were facing.
Right, I loved playing it that way because basically, if the logs were rolling your way, you could actually run away from the logs.
Well, not just that, but if you died,
yeah,
in the mission, you couldn't get across the pit or whatever.
That's
you
right.
You would start on the opposite side of the pit. You could just start over.
You know what? Now that you mention it, would you say that Pitfall was the first game to ever have a quote-unquote glitch or a quote-unquote secret? Like nowadays, there's always these secret ways of defeating things, and that's a secret, That was Pitfall's secret.
Yeah, I just noticed it because it's like, hey, if I can't... The one I hated in Pitfall was the alligators without the rope.
Yes. Oh, yes.
I always hated that.
You had to position yourself very carefully on their heads.
You had to be on their eye.
Yeah, you had to be right on their eye. Otherwise, you would fall right through. Now, Pitfall was one that never went away. PlayStation came out with Sony came out with a Pitfall game. And Pitfall games have continued. They've actually given him a voice. They've given him a personality. They kind of give him like Popeye arms, where he gets these huge forearms and stuff. But I actually liked the game. It was actually a pretty cool game. You had the talking leopard and everything. So Pitfall was one of those that stayed because it's just a classic character.
And ironically enough, or not really ironic, but if you ever play the game Marvel Ultimate Alliance, there's a part where you go into Murder World, Arcades Land.
Oh, really?
And you have to go into a Pitfall game, and you play Pitfall as it was back on the Atari. Only difference is your character is whichever character you were playing at the time.
Interesting. So you'd be like Spider-Man as Pitfall?
Yeah, but you can't swing.
You can't use the web.
You can only run and jump.
Right.
But it's the classic Pitfall.
Yeah. The one thing I always remember hating, though, was also the Scorpion. The Scorpion really wasn't that much of a big deal. It was all about timing. If you could jump him just right, he wouldn't kill you. Otherwise, he'd get you.
Yeah, I usually stayed away from the Scorpion.
So next up, after Pitfall, we're going to get with Berserk. And Berserk brings up another interesting thing about Atari. When you go through Atari, it's going to start off with really awesome artwork on the box and on the game. But then, when you're in the game itself, it's going to look like this. Which brings me to one thing I would always love. They got to remake some of these games. They got to revamp them, like they did for Pitfall. They totally reimagined Pitfall and were able to bring it to a modern age. Berserk would be awesome as a modern game,
Yeah, I think you could do so much with Berserk. Berserk, and again, another one of my favorite games. I used to love playing that.
Berserk was one of the first games that actually had like unlimited ammo because you were walking along and you were like this square bodies, and that's the best we could do with graphics at the time. But you could shoot as many times as you want. They didn't count your bullets. You know, and of course, who can forget that smiley face?
Oh, the smiley face was the thing.
Yeah, the bouncy smiley face. He was indestructible. You couldn't kill him.
And you had to run.
Yeah, when he came in the room, it was time to leave the room because he was trouble. And I would love to see that revamped for the modern age.
Didn't he also go through walls?
Yes, he did. And if you touched the walls, you got zapped. So remember, those walls just weren't barriers. They would kill you if you touched them. So, and those monster robot guys, you know, it was so funny because they really weren't that bad. They were there, but you could shoot them.
One hit kills.
Yeah, and if they shot you, the bullets traveled very slowly. So, but yeah, these were one hit wonders. You did not have like multiple lives or certain barriers of health, and there was no recovering from your health. You know, if you got hurt. That was it. That was game over. You were dead.
One hit kill.
Yeah, one hit kill, exactly. All right, so Berserk, awesome game, but let's not forget Q*bert.
Oh, classic.
That one was awesome. Now, Q*bert was very special, very unique, because all it was this little, I don't even know what he was, I guess alien, but he's hopping down these squares, and they change color. Now, it's your job to make sure they all matched a certain color. And sometimes, if you were lucky, if he jumped back, it didn't change color. But sometimes, if you jump one direction, then you jump backwards, and all of a sudden, it changes to like a third color. But you had to all match it the second color.
It was all based on what level you were on. When you first start, the earlier levels, they would change. They would not change back. At the end, they would change every time you jumped on it, and there were 3 colors.
Right. Now, my favorite thing, of course, was the snake. Tricking the snake was my favorite part. Because what you would do is you would land on a square that had a disc. The disc takes you to the very top. But you would wait for the snake, and if you can time it just right, the snake would hop onto your square and hop off the board because you hopped on the disc and rode to safety.
Do you remember the name of the snake?
No, I don't remember his name.
I think his name was Coily.
Coily?
I think that was the name of the snake.
You know what? I'll find out soon because I haven't seen Wreck-It Ralph yet, but he has a cameo. The snake has a cameo in Wreck-It Ralph. And of course, there was this one character, and I think it's the green guy, or the orange red ball or something, but something would come around every once in a while and change everything back.
Oh!
Remember that? If you didn't hurry enough, it would change it all back. But Q*bert was amazing.
I think it was the red ball.
Yeah, the red ball. Exactly. So next up, barnstorming. One of my first examples of flying, and barnstorming is really cool because technically, even though it doesn't show it in the picture here, you're supposed to go through the barn, not just over it. You got more points for going through it.
We had so much. I think you had to go through so many barns, and in a certain amount of time. Although sometimes it was still fun. You see the little geese up there at the top. It was just fun taking your plane and goosing them geese. It slowed you down. It was kind of bad, but it was just something morbidly fun about it.
Right. Well, that was one of those extra things. Remember, back in these days, we didn't have all the extras. We just had the one mission. And if you ran into a windmill, like sometimes you had those windmills, they killed you. So that was the one thing you had, and that was all you had. So it was nice that this was the beginning of imagination and trying to add extra stuff so that the game wasn't so monotonous over and over again. Because a lot of games got very monotonous, as you'll see, but we still loved playing them. We still loved watching the clocks and, gaining points and all that. Barnstorming, excellent example. One of the first flying games, I think, ever. That was actual flying. It was still very linear. Just up and down was all you did. It moved you forward like a plane would, so it wasn't that bad.
But couldn't you go forward and back? Like you could speed up or slow down?
Yeah, slow down. Yes, you did have some control over that. And still one of the first games that ever had anything like that. Next up, Atari Circus. Now, I did not have much experience with this. Joe, you did. Tell us about Atari Circus.
This was one of the few games you played with something called a paddle. It didn't have a joystick. It was a wheel you had in your hand with a button on the side. So you clicked the button, and the guy, you could see him up there at the top or in the middle of the screen, he would jump out, and you had the teeter-totter at the bottom. And you had to position the teeter-totter so he would land on the upside, bouncing the guy who was down up, popping the balloons. And at the harder difficulties, there were also little bricks that would float across the screen.
How are you supposed to tell the difference between a brick and a balloon? They look the same shape.
Oh, those are all balloons in this picture.
Right.
Bricks are actually below the balloons, and they're bigger. They're like longer and wider.
Okay. Yeah, very, this was as good as the graphics got back in the day, That was our graphics. Next up, Mega Mania, one of your all-time favorites.
This is probably my favorite Atari game.
So explain to us this level here. What's going on?
This is actually the last level until it loops, because basically there was like a couple levels where, like, the first level, there was like 3 rows of spaceships that went across the screen. While they fired at you, you fired at them, you killed them all, you go to the next one. Yep. The next one, everything came down diagonally, so that the first level, you would only get shot. The second level, they would not only shoot you, but they could also hit you. This is the last level where these asteroids come down, and they come down at very rapid pace.
If they hit you, did you die?
Yes, that was their only method.
Oh, okay.
But they were all over the screen.
Could you shoot them?
You could shoot them, and that was the goal. You had to shoot all of the asteroids because they would just basically continue to loop around.
Oh, wow. Well, and that's the big theme when it comes to Atari games. It does constantly loop around. You just kept going and going until you met a goal, or sometimes they just kept going and going, as you'll see.
You try to get the high score.
Exactly. You try to get the high score because it never ended. I mean, these games you could actually go for days with, okay? Oh, yeah. But it'd be the same thing over and over again. Which brings us to our next game, Asteroids.
Oh, this was a good one, too.
This one, like I said, I could spend hours with. This is one where, technically, you could move around in the game, but I like staying in the middle, waiting for the rocks to show, waiting for the ace of spades and the little clubs. They use, as you shot them, did you notice they use cards? They use, spades and clubs.
I've never played this on the home system. I always played it in the arcade that you talked about
earlier.
Really? Yeah, with the monochrome monitor when you had the little spinner thing. You had a spinner and a gun.
Yes, it was a ball. Yeah, you had this rolling ball.
Right.
Those were rough games because, let me tell you something. Once you cleared it, they came on the side. So you always wanted to stay in the middle. But if desperation hit, you could warp. Yes. And when you warped out, you were either very safe or you were in big trouble. Because it would warp you in the middle of nowhere. And sometimes it would warp you right in the middle of their path.
Oh, yeah.
It was always random. This would be a great movie, I think. A great revamp would be here. But what else would be a great classic? I mean, when people think of Atari, they think Asteroids. But the big one everyone thinks of? Space Invaders.
This is like I think it was one of the launch titles.
Exactly, and this is one that everyone thinks about. This is the one people play all the time when it comes to video games because it was just so cool. It got near impossible because basically it starts off here. These guys were way up. You shot them all, but they kept getting lower and lower and lower until you literally, if you didn't shoot them all, they were going to hit you in the next shot, literally.
And I think as you killed them, the less there were, the faster they moved.
Yes. Oh, no, absolutely. The more you shot, they got faster and faster until that very last one was going a mile a minute, literally. And you had to really time it. Space Invaders, classic game. It's what everyone thinks about when I think of Atari. That and Asteroids. But as you'll see, Atari has a lot of great games. And one of my favorite games, Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. Now, this is one that's the ultimate in monotonous. Because here, all you're doing is shooting these AT-ATs, or Imperial Walkers. They would always send 5 at a time. And if you ever killed one, they would send 5 more. And then they would just keep coming and coming and coming. I could literally get them to the point where as I shot them, I would only have 1 shot left. All of them, all 5 of them, and they were all coming. They all have 1 shot left, and I could take my speeder and just ram right through them. 1 shot, 1 shot, 1 shot, and just destroy them all in 1 shot. Completely clear the board. But of course that didn't matter because they just kept coming. They kept coming until you got the highest score or until you died. There was no end to this game.
I never played this one.
You never played Star Wars? Empire Strikes Back?
I never played Empire Strikes Back. I played lightsaber battles, but never Empire.
Oh, right, those Star Wars ones. Yes. Well, guys, that's all the time we have today. It was a great pleasure reminiscing about our fun Atari experiences. Again, I just hope they revamp a lot of them. I mean, let's face it, reboots is what they do nowadays, right? They don't come up with new things.
I'd be happy if they give me a best of series. They did that with, I believe it was PS2. They had an Activision Classics. I'd like to see something like that where they give us all our old games.
Right. Well, they do have that on the DSi now. The Atari's old games are still there.
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that.
Well, guys, it's been a pleasure talking to you. See you next time.
Take it easy.